Thank you, everybody, for coming to this joint meeting with the Village Council, Planning Commission, and Downtown Development Authority. Could I have a roll call vote, please? I'm calling this meeting to order. We're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance first. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll do the introductions on our roll call. I'm Village President Tim Borgheim, will go right all around the room.
Steve Carr, Village Council and Planning Commission.
Harry Wyland, Planning Commission.
Bob Roses, Village Manager.
Rachel Coy, Village Trustee.
George Wilkins, Trustee and Park and Rec.
Tim Wilkins, DDA.
Kevin Carr, DDA.
Dick Carlisle Workman. Mike Auerbach, Carlisle Workman.
Alan Levy, Goldtrack.
Megan Masson-Minnock, Carlisle Wortman.
Reva Drisky and DDA and property owner in the Village of Dundee.
Chuck Booth, Trustee.
Laura Perry, Chair, DDA.
Laura Lawrence, DDA.
Jerome Matty, DDA.
Brian Merkel, DDA.
Gonzalo Ismail, Gang, DDA.
David Wagner, Planning Commission.
Howard Silly, Village Council.
Joe Fenner, Planning Commission, ZBA.
Dave Almquist, Chairman of the Planning Commission.
Shirley Massengill, Village Clerk.
You want to go around to the back here?
These are citizens.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, Megan, would you like to give us the updates and the plans now?
Sure. My name is Megan Masson-Minnock. I've been the project manager for this, and just for members of the public who may have not been up to as much speed as the elected and appointed officials about this, what the village decided to do, I think almost over a year ago, was to undertake a strategic plan, a master plan, and a DDA TIF plan all together. A strategic plan lays out the goals and objectives for a municipality, and it's passed by your elected officials, so your village council. The master plan is mandated by the state through the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, you don't absolutely have to do it, but if you're doing it, then you should update it. So you had a master plan for quite a while, and this is an update of the master plan. And the body responsible is the Planning Commission, who's an appointed body, and they do the majority of the work, but Village Council gets to approve it. Then also you have a Downtown Development Authority, and they're responsible for a lot of things that you see in the downtown. And they're funded through something called tax increment financing. So that's what the TIF, you'll hear us say TIF a lot, that's what it stands for. And that TIF plan needs to be updated once every 20 years. Otherwise, it sunsets, and then your DDA doesn't exist anymore and it's not funded. So you're coming up on that date. At the end of the year, you have to have a new DDA TIF plan. So your elected and appointed officials had an unusual and, in our opinion, exciting endeavor to do all three plans at once. So we've been on a schedule since September of last year, and basically what we did was we had a survey, we gathered a lot of data, we went to a lot of places, we looked at how things had changed in the village and how they had not. We came back to this group in January and about that. And there were, and then what happened was each of these groups that are responsible for their plans worked with their individual consultants in our team. So, and this will be in the order that people will come after me to talk about what each group has done. Alan Levy, who is with Full Track, who is a subcontractor to us, but has been a great partner. He's worked with the village council to develop a strategic plan, and a draft of that strategic plan was in the packet. Then Dick Carlisle and another one of our colleagues, Mateo Paslacqua, worked with the DDA to update their TIF plan. You guys had a presentation in your June meeting about it. And that presentation was also in the packet for background. Then finally, Mike Auerbach has been working with the Planning Commission for a number of years now, but also over the past year has been working with them to update the master plan. And in the packet were the revised goals and objectives that everybody had agreed to. And so I jumped ahead, which I tend to do, and not stick to the slides. I apologize. And that was the packet. But really, what we wanted to do tonight was talk to you about some questions. Because as we've been doing this work with you and things and back and forth, these are what are coming up. Is do the goals in these plans align? And are you all on the same page? And where are there conflicts? And I'm gonna say conflicts are okay. Actually, conflicts sometimes cause the best ideas. And if you work with that tension in a constructive manner, it can help you. What changes are needed to any of these goals to support one another? Is there something in the strategic plan that's at odds in the DDA plan? Or are we missing each other in different things? And then also, we're gonna start rolling out these plans to the public. So to the group of elected and appointed officials, what's your advice to us as we're doing that? Finally, when we close, we'd like to hear from you all, in the next 5 years, what are you most excited for the village of Dundee? When you close your eyes and you see this place 5 years from now, what's the thing that makes you smile? But then also, what do you think will be your biggest challenge? Because both of those should be addressed in these 3 plans. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Alan, who's gonna talk about the strategic plan, what the goals were and what the process has been.
All right, thank you, Megan. So as you can see on there, this is like the high-level summary of what the strategic plan is all about. It's about 25 pages long. It goes into a lot of detail about each one of the projects that we've identified here, something that ought to be done. But when I kept trying to put it together, I went through like about 6 iterations, and I kept coming back to, well, what they really said to me, because I interviewed a lot of the people around this table one-on-one, and what I kept hearing and we heard in our joint meeting is that what's really important to you all is retaining the small town character. And I finally figured out that's actually the goal. That is actually the goal for the strategic plan, is to retain Dundee's small town character. How to do that is by improving governance, by updating plans and policies, by revitalizing downtown, and by managing growth and economic development. And so that's the structure of this strategic plan is I am pointing everything towards retaining Dundee's small town character by projects that are under those 4 categories. Can I hit the next slide? So when I look at the other 2 plans, I saw that, all right, there's a lot of overlap, as there should be. But what's in the strategic plan that isn't in the other ones is the governance stuff, which is also appropriate, because the governance stuff is what the village council and the DDA and everybody who was trying to figure out who they wanted to work with, how they wanted to work with it, what they wanted was a plan that covered everything and helped to improve the way people work together on those. And Megan didn't mention this, but we don't know of another example of where a village or a city or a town have done all 3 plans at the same time. And we think it's pretty remarkable. I think it's a real step forward to be able to say, we're gonna do all three of these at the same time, so we get everybody on the same page at the same time. So, in having all three plans together, I was able to look at them and say, okay, so you've got a lot of overlap, but the strategic plan is the one that covers governance and how the three boards work together, the three organizations work together. Our strategic plan has greater emphasis on infrastructure and addressing the east side commercial than the other two plans do. And so we're gonna need to work on whether or not we need to beef up either one of the other plans or tone this one down in terms of that. But that's what I heard from you. I heard it from you guys at our last joint meeting about how there wasn't a lot of focus on the east side commercial and how we needed to add more of that emphasis. Also, the strategic plan has a lot of emphasis on infrastructure. Especially in my conversations with the village council, I heard a lot about roads and sewers and water systems. And the CIP is in the strategic plan, doing the capital improvements plan is in the strategic plan here as one of the main goals there, because underneath, all the systems underneath the ground, the ones you can't see are just as important as the ones you can. And when you look at the master plan and the DDA plan, they mostly focus on what's above ground, which is what master plans and DDA plans are supposed to do. But to get all three of those going at the same time, we need to have those two plans be cognizant of the infrastructure issues in that the village has. And really, that's, again, one of those opportunities to really make sure that everything's aligned so that you do the things in the order that they should be done, and you'll save money, and you'll get more done in addition. I looked at the DDA Tiff plan. It had greater emphasis on design, public infrastructure, and business support. And then maybe if you added a fourth thing in there, the other thing that I saw in there is a lot of putting tools together to do more later. So like, for example, there's not a lot in there about doing great, big, giant development projects because the tools aren't there, maybe even the market's not there for that because there's so many things that need to be done first. So it's probably appropriate, but we want to look at that and see if there's anything we need to add on that. The master plan emphasizes quality, nature, and employment. And for one thing, I didn't hear a lot from you all during the strategic planning process about employment and jobs and so forth. And so it's interesting that it did get into the master plan and wasn't as highly placed in the strategic plan. So we need to look at that and see if we need to add stuff to the strategic plan for that reason. And then in terms of nature, I heard a lot, or at least a significant amount, about both recreation and doing things with river raising. And we want to make sure that the other two plans reflect that as well, which I think they do to a certain extent, but we want to make sure that we're really tight on those two topics. In my view, the next plan would be that I would probably work with Ryan, because he's the one that's got to implement this thing. And he knows you all and where your boards are coming from, and we can tweak those and get those things, at least in terms of the strategic plan, sort of balanced out, I guess is the best word for it. All right.
Yeah, and the goal is that the strategic plan, according to the schedule that we're on and seem to be able to keep to it just about, is that the strategic plan would be ready in August and past August, September. So, Tiff, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the DDA plan.
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's been a pleasure working with the DDA under Laura Perry's leadership. They've really taken an incredibly active role in trying to reimagine what the DDA can do in its next 20 years. You know, the first plan was done in 1988, and a comprehensive or an effort such as this hasn't been done since then. And so you can imagine, you know how much has changed, not just in the downtown, but Dundee as a whole and the world around you for that matter. And so the DDA board has taken taking a different approach in terms of things that should be emphasized. First of all, emphasis on improving the physical environment and investing in infrastructure. Some of the things that have been done in downtown are now aging and need to be revitalized. And some new thoughts need to be brought into play about other physical improvements, such as safe pedestrian crossings, for example, better connections to the river, things of that nature. To improve one of the goals, first and foremost, of the DDA is to improve the economic environment, is to do more direct promotion in terms of new business development from that standpoint. We know we have some vacant storefronts. We know that we have businesses that could be successful in the village if given some of the proper stimulus to be able to do so. To also enhance the social environment with creating appealing spaces, for the residents as well as visitors, to the village that happen to pass through your community. 17,000 cars a day pass through the village. Some view that as a liability, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of business to be captured to be able to benefit those downtown business owners. And needing to get the support for that. I know council's heard a lot about this in terms of support staff. So far, all these years, it's been pretty much an effort solely by the DDA board to be able to do these things. But some of the vision of this plan really is going to require more professional support than what they currently had. And like a lot of DDA, your DDA in the past has viewed themselves as sort of an end source of financing. In other words, a sole source of financing through their TIF funding. And what we are advising, and they're agreeing with, is they should be sort of the first source to leverage other sources of funding. Through foundations, through grants, through private donations, private investment, but not to be the sole source of financing for everything that they do. And so that's some of the change in thinking that I think has occurred with this whole process. One of the things driving this thing is the fact that the village in general is bleeding a lot of dollars outside the village to other areas. You have the market potential within a 1 mile, 3 mile, and a 5 mile radius, which you are at the center of. We have done a market study that does indicate that there are lots of opportunities to create new businesses right here in Dundee and capture those dollars that right now are being spent elsewhere over, I think we said, $11 million gap, meaning that's the amount of dollars that are being bled annually someplace else. And so there is a market for businesses such as home furnishings, electronics, personal care, pet supplies, convenience items. Even though the market doesn't necessarily show for food and restaurant use, I know there's a market for it because generally those are destination types of businesses that, if you have a good product, people will generally flock to it, okay? But the point being is, regardless of what the specific categories are, there is potential for more business here as a result of the assets that you have in this community. And by the way, I've remarked many times that, as far as your downtown goes, it's got what we sort of say good bones, it's got the kind of physical assets, the physical appearance that many communities would absolutely love. And in fact, frankly, are trying to create, from nothing to try to create the kind of historical, small town, hometown feel that you have. And so there's a number of programs that we are outlining in the DDA plan that are listed here, but just a few just to highlight that is sod improvements. In other words, provide some types of grants to local businesses to improve the front appearance of the building, to expand the business summit, which, by the way, I was able to attend your business summit February?
April.
Oh, wow, April. What an exciting event that was. There was a lot of people there, and I found it to be very, very encouraging. To provide some incentives for both soft and hard cost incentives to businesses to get started in this community and help them thrive. improve the non-motorized pedestrian crossings. That's something that we've heard from the surveys, from many of you, that with the amount of traffic, that some of the pedestrian crossings don't feel safe. And there are definitely some things that can be done to address the streetscaping so that it is more to the scale of what your downtown is. Some have commented that some of the streetscaping has become overgrown, needs to be maintained. You know, street trees aren't necessarily always forever. They sometimes need to be replaced when they get too big for the environment that they're in. But there's also some other improvements to downtown seating and things like that that could be implemented. To start a pop-up space program, perhaps rent one of the vacant buildings and to allow pop-up businesses to start there to see to test market how successful they could be as a potential program. Other tourism and event promotions using the mill space perhaps to perhaps acquire real estate that can then be flipped and developed in a manner that you would like to see it developed, or to create a small business incubator, and to promote better wayfinding signage. I've heard a lot from people about the fact that we don't have enough parking. Well, we do have a lot of parking, it's just hard to get to. And the signage, a better signage program, would help a lot in terms of directing people to the parking that you already have. So these are just some of the programs that are in the plan that the DDA intends to more directly invest in downtown and to leverage other dollars that are available that you're losing out on because you're not pursuing those to promote the downtown in a much more positive manner. Okay?
Thanks, Dick. And the DDA plan has a hard deadline, unlike the strategic plan, the master plan. So that is gonna start to move, I believe, DDA, you're looking in July to make a motion to pass things on to the village council, and then to get that ball rolling so that you have approvals in September and make sure everything's filed with the county in time.
Yeah, so essentially, when I took over as chair this past March, the DDA, when we looked at the structure of it, was more focused on event planning, and really the DDA needs to focus on its middle name, which is development. So a lot of the work that we have been doing is looking at how we can focus on the development of downtown and leverage some of our events to drive economic impact to our downtown, but use what we can to bring in more dollars to the community to get done what we need to do. So for example, we have our Halloween bash. We decided to partner this year with the Community Foundation and built a new relationship there, where all of the dollars from our Halloween bash went to the Wholesome Fund, and the Wholesome Fund is specifically for grants to be issued to better Dundee and their wellness and well-being of Dundee. So we raised $6,000 through our Halloween bash. We received matching funds to make it $15,000. And then we are now being asked to submit a proposal, a shovel-ready proposal, to be granted a $25,000 grant. And those are the types of opportunities and types of investment that we can bring into Dundee if we look at the DDA and the Tiff plan as more of seed funding to go after other dollars. And as they discussed, employment is going to be something that we'd like to put in that plan, whether it's a DDA manager or a shared economic development manager, which we have budgeted in our DDA. But there's a lot of opportunity for us to take the plans, like our streetscaping plan, our traffic calming plan, placemaking, and go after other dollars. Now UBC has funds available. There's philanthropic groups that have plans available. Coordinating with Parks and Rec saw some of their plans that came out. That falls within the DDA district. Those are things that we can help seed and fund, but then also use staff to go after other grants that are available through these philanthropic funds and state issued funds that we can help make these projects happen. And that's how we need to start looking at the DDA.
Thanks. well, I'd like to move on to master plan. And Mike, do you wanna take over?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Mike Auerbach. I've been working with the village and Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals for a few years now. I review development proposals and give presentations for anything that go before those bodies. But as Megan mentioned earlier, I've also been working with the Planning Commission on reviewing and drafting updates to the village's master plan. So the master plan is the official document that spells out the village's vision for future land use and development in the entirety of the village. That includes everything from where housing will go, commercial uses, industrial uses, and also where natural areas and open space should be preserved. It's not the law, but if a community has a zoning ordinance, it has to be based upon a master plan. And even though it's not binding in the same sense as your zoning ordinance, it's an important document because both the Planning Commission and Village Council need to rely on what it says for when they're reviewing things like rezoning requests or certain types of development proposals. So while it's not binding in the same sense as your ordinances, it's still an important policy document. And overall, I think based on the Planning Commission's discussion, I think we've been talking about staying the course overall, not making significant updates to the master plan document, but I've found a few areas where it could be tweaked. So the first content that we've reviewed and updated is the goals and objectives section. And that spells out the village's goals and objectives for a variety of topics, different land use areas, natural feature preservation, infrastructure, etc. And we haven't been making a lot of substantive changes. Most of them have just been wordsmithing, making the goals and objectives clearer, and also trying to make the language a little more easy to quantify and make it more actionable in a sense, making sure that like the goals and objectives are things that we can more objectively say in however many years' time. Yes, we've done that, we can check it off the list, or oh no, we haven't quite done that, maybe that needs a little more work. But some of the more substantive changes with that section have been related to housing. So we've added content making it more explicit that along some of the corridors, and in particular N50 between downtown and US 23, that uses other than single-family residential and even commercial uses may be more appropriate, or may be appropriate in those locations, as long as they blend well in both their appearance and function with adjacent neighborhoods and don't cause undue traffic impacts, things of that nature. We also updated the goals and objectives to acknowledge that there is a variety of housing types in the village's older neighborhoods. That it's not exclusively just single-family residential, and that there are duplexes, even 3-unit dwellings, and even some small multifamily buildings interspersed throughout. So while the goal for those areas will still be predominantly single-family residential, we updated the master plan to acknowledge that there are a number of locations in the village where a greater variety of housing types could be appropriate, just as long as they keep or blend well with the existing rhythm, appearance of existing buildings, setbacks from the streetscape, etc. We also updated the housing language because the Planning Enabling Act was amended in recent years to make it more explicit that if you have a master plan, it needs to include language spelling out what the housing needs of your community are, the diverse housing needs, and how you will meet it through your zoning ordinance. So another item, now I'm getting to the sort of the exclusive sneak peek of what the Planning Commission is going to be talking about next week. A new item that we have not talked about yet is what the master plan and zoning ordinance have to say about agricultural land uses. Neither the master plan or zoning ordinance now really say much of anything about agricultural land, but there are a number of properties in the village that are still in use for active agricultural cultivation and potentially other farm operations. This map in the green hashed area just shows, based on assessing data, who is still claiming an agricultural exemption, or what the at least assessing office is classifying as agricultural land. So one of the items we'll be talking about at the upcoming meeting is whether we want to add language in the master plan to lay the groundwork for allowing farmland through the zoning ordinance and then identifying places where agricultural activity should be allowed. A part of the reason for doing that is it just affirms what's going on in the village already anyway, but it also gives you the ability to say where agricultural activities might not be appropriate. So in a bit of an extreme, but not so extreme example, if someone wants to start raising goats in their backyard in the middle of a neighborhood, you'd have more of a leg to stand on to be able to say no if you already have ag uses permitted somewhere else versus nowhere at all.
Mike, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah,
too?
absolutely.
In the survey that was done earlier last year, December, January, we asked about farmland preservation, and that was something that people felt very strongly about, is to preserve that agriculture. And when you don't have it in your master plan, you don't have it in your zoning ordinance, you, one, aren't articulating its value, but two, then also somebody could argue that maybe it's not in the zoning ordinance that shouldn't be allowed. There's some things with Michigan Right to Farm Act that come in, but that complicate things, but that's one of the reasons to suggest that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So regarding the housing content and the different planned areas for different densities of housing that are shown on the future land use map and also in the description of each future land use map categories, as I mentioned, we're not thinking about really changing the course dramatically, just changing the terms we're using for different categories and maybe tweaking what the priorities are within each different planned future land use plan category for housing. So what is now, what I believe medium residential, what we're going to suggest is that just the name be changed to village residential, and reiterate that that area consists of the historic village neighborhoods, that it'll be predominantly single family, but that there are existing a greater variety of housing types in the old village neighborhoods, and that the village and that new housing types like duplexes may be appropriate in certain locations. The next direction that the Planning Commission has given based on what we've talked about so far is that there needs to be some sort of transition area between the densest multifamily developments in the village, primarily Bell Estates, and the surrounding areas. So there's also smaller pockets of both existing multifamily and areas that might be appropriate for smaller multifamily developments in the future. So we're tweaking multifamily use categories to correspond with the villages to multifamily zoning categories. One would essentially be for smaller multifamily developments, things like 3-4 unit buildings, even small multifamily buildings up to 8 units, and we could pick strategic locations where those would be permissible and envisioned for the future. And then the last category is primarily for what's existing already in the village. Mostly around Bell Estates, but there's also, as you know, other multifamily developments in other locations. Proportionally, the village has a greater share than most other Monroe County communities of multifamily housing, and so the feedback or the direction the Planning Commission's given so far is that the village has is relatively built out in terms of its multifamily development, that those will of course be allowed to continue, but any new or additional multifamily developments should probably be limited and only permitted in very specific and appropriate locations. So some of the areas on the map where we'll be discussing changes is the undeveloped area between Bell Estates south of M50 and the Stonebrook site condo. Right now, it's planned for low density residential, and as you can see, some of the areas where multifamily has been developed is still shown as commercial, so we may need to tweak those designations just to reflect what's actually on the ground and consider a new future land use category in between the lower density residential and the multifamily commercial adjacent to M50. That could be anything from that new lower density multifamily category I mentioned to something that allows more mixed use. Similar considerations apply to north of Cabela's. We haven't gotten as specific yet about what the transition in that area would be, but some of the comments we've heard so far is that it's kind of a stark jump from the most intense dark red commercial that you see that includes Cabela's to low density residential, so we might want to think more about what would be appropriate in that area. And then lastly, the master plan already has language or describing sort of a mixed use corridor on M50 in between US 23 and the downtown. Well, the plan so far is to reaffirm that, say it may be appropriate for limited commercial uses and smaller multifamily housing, but that in terms of the built environment, it should look very much like it does now and mirror the adjacent neighborhoods as well. We'll also be revisiting the purpose of this office designation, that's the red and the red striped areas. We haven't talked about this as a commission yet, but we'll probably should look at whether or not the areas that are currently designated for office truly are that on the ground, and if that's really the desired intended use for those different smaller areas in the village. And then lastly, the one remaining general business designated area includes Kroger and the surrounding properties. That portion of the village is relatively unique. It may warrant having its own planning designation and zoning district, but that's one of the last topics we'll be talking about in the planning commission. And that sums it up.
Yeah, and in our original schedule, we were looking at the master plan starting in its adoption phase in the fall. It's got a much longer adoption because of the state law, which requires a 63-day review period by adjacent communities in the county and utilities. And so when we had proposed this process, we had that one last because we knew it was the longest. Could then, if things got bumped down the road a little bit, that's the one that could get bumped down the road. Because the DDA has a hard deadline, and the strategic plan is really an overall to guide all of the plans. So we've got questions for you. Now I want to spend the rest of the majority of the meeting, but I really recognize that we threw a lot of information at all of you, and not everybody had been to everybody else's meetings or whatnot. So what questions do you have for us or each other about the plans themselves and what folks have done since we last met in January? And I'm gonna apologize for public comment at the end. And so hold your question, and then we'll have it then, but folks at the table, sir?
Okay, so the first thing I heard was the agriculture land. Is that gonna stay agriculture? I mean, are you really talking about developing it? And, how does that fit in with the data center we don't want?
Well, the primary intent of adding more language about agriculture in the master plan is to give you more tools for preservation. And so the village, as far as village policy goes, would have more tools and leverage to encourage agricultural preservation in the long term. Ultimately, what the property owners do with that land is, is a different story. To some extent, out of the village's hands. I've worked in other agricultural communities and hear from farmers there that it's difficult for them to say no to selling and leasing their property for new development or new technologies, energy, or data centers. But adding language to the master plan would give the village more tools to preserve agricultural land, and would be something you could rely on in the event you've got a request for a rezoning that you could use to say no.
So you're saying that we need to rezone it?
No, just that this would create a new overlay in the master plan.
And we can
That
create
is-
the language that says, not
for agricultural preservation.
only.
Can
you explain the difference between how the master plan would talk about certain locations versus the actual zone? Like, you touched on earlier, you explained it earlier, that the master plan is a good policy document, but it's not necessarily binding, right? So, could you explain that a little bit more, like the property, say, north of Cabela's is right now, look like a farm land use. And you talked about bringing that to the planning commission as like part of the master plan to make that farm, but what's it zoned as right now?
Oh, I have to.
Or another example.
Well, he's looking,
Yeah.
why don't you look, and I'm gonna attempt to answer the question with an example from another one of our client communities, which is Ypsilanti Township. So very large township, very different south of I-94 than north of I-94. And they have a lot of farmland in that but they actually had a couple who came to build their retirement, start a vineyard, and they found that they were illegal because the zoning didn't allow any agriculture. So when we did their master plan, when we updated their master plan, we came to them and we said, we had asked all the farmers, and some people who were doing urban agriculture, like in a neighborhood, we asked the community what they wanted, and then it came back that we really want to preserve this agriculture in all the open space that we can, because we recognize we're getting pushed. So what was done in the master plan is we planned those areas and said, these are areas where there are active farms, good soils, and large acreage. Because that's kind of the magic combo that you need for an agricultural economy. And then, after the master plan was adopted, what they then did in their zoning is said that we had an agricultural overlay, which is kind of like a contact lens. So the single family zoning underneath that was for most of these farms stayed. So the farmer could still have their 401k or their investment. But this agricultural overlay went over it and said, you can have a farm, and also for the case of the vineyard couple that I talked about, you can have a tasting room if it's a special land use and under certain circumstances, yada, yada, yada. What's happened is we've had, since that time the zoning ordinance was adopted, I think in 2022, we've had 4 rezonings. One was for that farm, but 3 were for other farms or agricultural areas that then people could have assurances that they could invest in their property. And then also, if they were applying for tax credits for agricultural land, if it's not zoned for agriculture, the state's likely gonna say no, in terms of those. So that's how you can have those tools to help preserve agriculture.
Yeah, so that area right now is zoned for RA1, one family residential, but I think the way the village could adopt policies that provide for more agricultural preservation is exactly like Megan described. The master plan is sort of your why, is where you spell out all the intent for agricultural preservation and identify areas for it, and that's where we include the language like what Megan described about soil types that are good for agriculture, productive soils, large lots, existing agricultural operations, and say in the master plan it's the village's intent and part of the village's values to preserve those land uses, and our zoning ordinance, you'd implement something like Megan described, potentially an overlay for farmland preservation, limiting the uses to agriculture.
All right, any other questions about plans and process before we
I
ask you
have
some
a
questions?
question
Yeah.
about, the residential part of it, that you were talking about. So you were saying that, the planning commission said that they're basically like, don't really want any more high density housing. I don't know if that's exactly what you said, but that was kind of how I took it. And I think that that's kind of a common concern within the community. But then the language here says, encourages diverse housing types, higher density in appropriate places and locations. So, I guess, how do those two things go together? Because they sound like they're conflicting.
So the idea is that some of that language would both affirm what's on the ground already, both the duplexes and even triplexes in old village neighborhoods, of which there's a fair number already. And so these are tweaks that we'll need to make, but hopefully the master plan would set the stage for zoning changes that could potentially say duplexes are allowed in wherever area, or wherever the commission eventually recommends. Or that along M50 between 23 and the downtown, that maybe greater density would be allowed. But if that additional flexibility would be specific to the smaller housing types, and will be a little more general about it in the master plan, and be specific in the zoning ordinance, that bigger multifamily projects and taller buildings would pretty much be planned and zoned for where they exist now.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Didn't we have a survey that already said we were oversaturated with apartments, and if you're talking duplexes, you're talking about more apartments? We discussed that at a few of our meetings, right? Do you remember that? How we had said there was no new apartments needed? We had percentage-wise, we were already over.
I think part of the comments from the first meeting was we're at 30% rental.
I thought it was 38.
That's what I'm saying.
I think it's close to 38, when Vince was here.
There's about 30%, and I know that,
And we only wanted 30%.
and I know that the planning commission is talking about a more of an emphasis on single-family homes, maybe some smaller
Right.
single-family homes, without trying to exclude other housing, but just more of an emphasis on the single-family.
I'm saying, but not bringing more duplexes and more apartments. And that's what the survey showed.
Duplexes and townhouses weren't really discussed as much as like, so like Bell Estates where you have 7 apartments and stuff, and those kind of apartments. I think they're trying to separate those kind of apartments.
But yes, I'm just trying to point out that one of the surveys that we had done for the village, I thought, said we were sitting at 38%, and the community only needed 30%. So what you're saying to me is that if we make more apartments, we should make more duplexes and stuff, and you're saying we should make more apartments. So that conflicts with the other surveys.
So I think we have been talking about different housing types. I think and it's still an ongoing discussion.
Right.
Especially about where more duplexes might be appropriate and how many. We have talked about the apartment versus owner-occupied arrangement. And a distinction that is important to keep in mind is that through your zoning, you can't limit the number of rentals. That's something that local governments don't have the authority to police. But what you can do is limit or say where different kinds of housing are appropriate. Everything from single family to duplexes to other types. We've certainly talked about the concerns that you bring up in those survey results. So it's an ongoing conversation we're having with it.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing up, because that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this meeting, is to make sure that if folks are going down, planning commission's going down one road, and village council is concerned about it, or DDA feels that that would wouldn't support your plans, we want to find out where those are. So, it's all your hand.
This is kind of, I'm glad I got caught last year, because I think this is something that we've discussed before. I've seen it in the past with our planning commission's input on the master plan. The things that we ask for on the planning commission concerning multifamily structures, and I'll use that term encompassing all multifamily structures, is what would be legally defensible when we have a developer come to us that wants to build a structure, whether it's a duplex or a large apartment complex. The things that we've had in the past was having that percentage of the overall mix of housing within the village. And are we at that, I don't want to use the word saturation point there, but are we at that point there where we offer a variety of housing that meets those needs? And like Michael said, what we need is the guidance of where that, in the future land use map there, where might it be built in the future? You know, so having that language there, I think is appropriate because it avoids any litigation, that may come to the village there when we make a bad choice, and such that we can stand on firm ground there, that we already have, a good variety of the various means there, so. Proceed forward with adding that language in there. I wanted to add one last point there, I think was Stephen's, comment there about agricultural, and farmland. An example where we used the master plan, for a request where they wanted it to take I'll use the term soybean field, north of the high school, and use it as a laydown area for piping for the gas line that was coming through Michigan at that time. The master plan and the future land use map there said, future land use was, if it was gonna be developed at all, it was gonna be single, family housing. That it was not in alignment, their desire to rezone that was not in alignment with our master plan, as well as our zoning ordinances there. And they politely walked away from that endeavor there, and it was our master plan. Our master plan had just recently been updated there to include all that language there. So there's value there to protecting the farmland on what we would envision the future to be for that farmland, whether it be state agricultural or maybe single family housing.
What's the diversification of the percentage of housing built around any of the infrastructure that we would need to bring in, like water, utilities, or how did we get to those numbers?
So that's one of the things to do in the master plan is to look at where those utilities are and then put those densities accordingly. And that's another way to restrict where things go. So for instance, higher density residential obviously needs big pipes to deal with everything that comes with that. And so you should only put that where there's appropriate utilities. And
That would be a part of the future plan.
yeah, a part of the future planning, and that goes into where you put things actually on the map, in terms of looking at that. The other things that you could do, and I don't know whether we've discussed this at the planning commission level, is having a growth boundary, for your utilities where they won't go past. And then also sometimes from a downtown's perspective also is to have things sprawl out sometimes isn't helpful to you if you're depending on foot traffic, and having dense neighborhoods around you, if those things are competing.
Is there any timeline as to when properties in the downtown will be reviewed? Some of the things that came up was we want to invest in a larger portion of our fund going to facade grants or investment into bringing businesses in, whether it's some type of incentive to encourage a business to come downtown. Of course, we don't want to do that if it's not going to be mixed use or it's residential, they want it to be commercial. So I guess what would the timeline look for when you guys are looking at the downtown properties specifically?
To establish the zone,
To establish.
to establish the zone. Or are you gonna change it at all? You're gonna leave it the way it is?
I think so we'll be talking about the draft future land use category for the downtown at the upcoming meeting. And substantively, I don't think there are any significant changes. It'll still allow for a variety of uses, it'll still encourage historic preservation, but we're removing some content that suggests establishing a formal historic district. So that aside, no substantive changes have come up so far.
Well, I do know that Wolverine Park is shown as residential
Yes,
on the zoning map.
Yes.
That one needs to be fixed.
yes.
So make sure that gets done. 'Cause I think we had it in our TIF plan. We actually had that put in there. Mateo changed that, but I'll make sure that it matches your zoning map as well.
Okay, thanks.
Are we still looking at, the hotel right next to Cabela's there? I haven't heard anything about that in a while.
I don't think we've heard from those applicants in a little while either.
So maybe it's dropped.
they meet, I'm sorry, they may have backed out, and, I'd have to look at when they were formally approved, but their site plan will expire at a certain point.
Isn't that a year from the time we approved it?
I believe so.
Yes, I think we're already past that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you all were starting out along a great road to lead us to the next discussion, because you were really talking about where things align and where they don't between the DDA plan and what the master plan is. And that's what we wanted to ask people about. So I'm gonna come over here back to the DDA side. I'll go to, because the majority of you seem to be right, like you're sitting together. Then village council, then planning commission. Asking those groups is like, where do you see alignment and where do you see conflict, or you're anxious about conflict with the other plans?
I didn't see, after reviewing 83 pages, I didn't really see any conflicts. There were things flowed very nicely. They fit together very nicely. There were some places where there was a little bit more aggressive in some areas, which is a good thing, because we can't do everything. And the planning commission pretty much controls a lot of what goes on based on the zoning ordinance. So, I thought it went rather smoothly, and there were really no major conflicts. I mean, there's small things, grammatical things, and maybe like some acronyms were used that maybe should be spelled out. You know, Michigan Department of Transportation, and then use MDOT. The calling out of the floodplain zone overlay. There is no such document as that. So if someone wanted to research that, they would never find it. So I don't know if you all understand how zoning maps work, how floodplain maps work, but they're divided into zones. So there's A, there's AE, there's X, there's unlimited. There's
Pay
R
for insurance when you're in some.
Right, yeah, that's true, that's true. But anyway, the bottom line is, I think that terminology that you used in there was in caps, which to me would mean, oh, search it, you'll find it. And it doesn't exist as that term. So it needs to either be a map of zones based on the firm maps or the floodplain, excessive floodplain map. Somehow pull the floodplain map out and grab the caption and use it that way. But you need to separate the word zones from that title, because the zones are within the floodplain map. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
And then the other one was, you use bid. We need to, most people don't understand what that means. So you need to spell out the acronym first.
Well,
It's in the title.
that was the only thing that caused tension.
Oh, you
I'm
know
gonna,
that.
I'm gonna be thankful. So from village council, when you're hearing, or when you looked at what was in the packet, or from what you've heard, about the TIF plan and the master plan, where did you feel like there were a lot, where's there alignment or was there conflict? So it seems like it felt like there's a little bit of conflict tonight about what role is multifamily and where it goes and how it goes.
Would say that.
Concern. And then I also, you know, through this process, we've been talking to people, at planning commission, steering committee, whatnot. We've heard about tension, and I think, Alan, you have, definitely in governance, about tension in relationships between these three bodies. And one of the things that we would hope that we could help do is to set structures in these plans to foster good relationships, because you're all trying to get to the same point of that goal of preserving your small town character. So are there things that we can do in these documents to help all of you in the future?
I have something. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, I don't think there's any tension between the planning commission and village council or the DDA. I think we've all worked very well together. So unless I'm mistaken, I am not aware of any tension with our group, so.
I think from my perspective,
Huh?
You guys are Switzerland.
from my perspective, being able to see the other plans, since I'm not involved in a lot of these other meetings, being able to see those has been helpful for me to understand where they're coming from. 'Cause I don't have a background in business, I don't have a background in being a part of that type of community group. So for me, being able to see that was helpful, since I'm not particularly involved in their meetings.
I do have something. I would like to say that I do think the three plans align very well, like when I reviewed them. I thought that they did fit well together, but specifically when it comes to, I guess what you would say like your SWOT analysis and talking about what was referred to as infighting between the different groups. I don't necessarily think that that's the best, maybe the best description of it. My experience is that some of what has been referred to as infighting is actually happening because people are raising genuine governance questions. And then a culture has kind of developed that has allowed those people to be attacked both in meetings and outside of meetings in order to get around actually addressing the substance of their questions. So I think in order to actually address that issue, there needs to be some kind of procedure in place that allows for open dialogue and transparency when questions about governance come up. So that's what I know.
And that was something that we addressed early on with the DDA, probably April or May, where we brought in a shared services agreement with the DDA in the village, which we still have some bumps in the road, but working on the compliance and setting the meetings and the notes and utilizing village staff for that. And I think that that's one of the areas that we should probably all lay out and discuss is employment and staff, and utilization of employment and staff, because we have funds to invest in either a DDA manager or put towards an economic development director to take all of these visions and plans that we have for the village and go out and actually capitalize on that. Be the point of contact when businesses are looking to invest in the village of Dundee. When the planning commission is all volunteers and the DDA is all volunteers aren't available to meet during the day, they're running point on these projects. They're going out and securing grants, and they're taking the plans that we set in Parks and Rec. They're taking the plans that we've set to work forward, and I think that together we haven't come up with a plan on what our staff is gonna look like to be able to move these plans forward, and how we're all putting skin in the game from our different goals like Parks and Rec and DDA that have funds to use as seed money to help manage the growth of our village. So I think that's a conversation that we have to have and have good alignment on that, and make sure that we're being transparent and make sure that we have somebody that's professional, that's able to help these businesses navigate their growth through Dundee with our vision, our plan that we've set forward. And I think, working on this now and then bringing somebody in to help operate that is probably the best case scenario, because we're putting this plan together now all together.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I listen to everything and I listen to everybody. A couple of key points to me would be the traffic, as you mentioned, sir. That's gonna come into play, whether this town's gonna grow, you're not gonna stop it, it is on what highway. Do we leave some money on the table? I think we probably do, but I think that's all workable, But another thing is, it's hard to maintain that small town character with the growth that this village has seen in the past 10 years. I mean, it's hard. I've been here my whole life, so I've attend, the meetings that our village council attends. And luckily, we are working on our sewer system, which definitely comes into play as your town's growing. So those are things that have to be seriously looked at, before you think about just bringing in any type of business at any time or whatever. You have to make sure that you're ready for that, because it's gonna come. There's things we can do to attract it, I'm sure. We just have to be careful and monitor the traffic, and we have to absolutely make sure that our sewer system is up to date as this town grows. I just don't want those two things to get left behind. They're very critical in growth. In talking about bringing in businesses and what you can do for it, I'm all for it. At a reasonable pace, if it could be controlled, but at the same time, we have to take those two major things in consideration, traffic and our sewer system. I just want that to kind of be at the forefront, that everyone understands that, not to just say, we're gonna have a big party and bring in a bunch of things, we have to be prepared for that.
And one point to add to that is that I know with talking about the data center, when we first heard about that, there had already been meetings, and I wanna say between, people in our government and a couple of corporations that we pay. I wanna say it was, Carlisle Wortman, Mannington Smith, that were having meetings with people in data center development, and we wanna make sure that it wasn't was it just coincidental that DT came to us and said, oh, we wanna create a new power plant at the same time the data center wants to go in. And then, oh, we want to extend all of our wastewater and out on the other side of 23 where the new power plant was gonna be. And are all these things coincidental? Clock cameras, the whole shot. We want to make sure that our small town stays within what the residents want, not just what everyone thinks will do better for growth.
One thing, the DDA's focus right now is not to build superstructures downtown. Our goal is to make what currently is here more attractive.
And that's
So the buildings that are here now are what we're gonna focus on to try and make better, to try and fit, to try and which are accommodated by the existing utility systems because they are already here and they've been used before. So the idea of maybe getting ahead of it when it comes to utilities, DDA isn't gonna do that. DDA is going to use what we have. We just wanna make it look better and we just wanna fill those vacant spaces. So outside of the DDA district, that's a whole nother story. But just so that you understand, that's the philosophy that we have now.
Right.
Is that is our goal. So downtown is not going to become some fancy lit, spectacular Las Vegas.
I, just having some casual conversations with some of the property owners and what they intend to do with the building. There's one for sale that's a little above market rate right now. If there was a business or a potential buyer, would you be willing to come down same thing with the rent? Just having those types of conversations and building those relationships. Should we have somebody to fill those vacant storefronts, know what's going on, why they're not interested in leasing, why they're not interested in selling, so that we can know what we can do to hopefully get them filled. And then we discussed as a DDA in our last meeting to get some quotes from a planner, to write an RFQ for some of the traffic calming, since that was one of the largest, areas of need that came back in our study, around, the triangle, as you're coming into town. We have a nice healthy fund balance, and there are some ways for us to get some matching funds, with philanthropic funds, to, put towards that project. But the first step is writing the request, then seeing what would come back. That could parking issues, so, better signage, so that people know where they can park, and some of the streetscaping as well. Some of the feedback, the DDA has been, our trees are overgrown, so you can't even see some of the storefronts and what's there as you're going through the triangle, and then you're probably going too fast through the triangle, so you can see what businesses are there to slow down and enjoy your cup of coffee at Cool Beans. So those are some of the things that we're, starting to put in motion.
I have a couple points before you move on to the next steps.
Well, I just wanted to respond to one thing if I could.
Course.
In terms of, you sort of had questions about data centers and DTE and whatnot, and it's imperative that, I would say, advice to the planning commission, I'm gonna be the person at your meeting next week, is that you articulate what you want there. And if those types of uses are counterintuitive to what you think the small town character is, that should be in the master plan. And so because, well, we wanna be your consultants for decades, there's no guarantee that that's gonna happen. And also there's no guarantee that everybody at this table is gonna be at this table in 5 to 10 years, or the next time something like this comes down the pike. I've been doing this for 25 years, Dick's been doing it for 40. You know, there's these onslaught of new land uses that come in and rock everybody's boat. But the best thing that you can have in order to be prepared for those is to have a good plan that articulates what your vision is, where you want things, and how you want them done.
Which is why I'm trying to get that point across to you folks.
Yeah, and we,
So that you can.
we absolutely hear you.
That language is in.
Yeah, so, and then also, whoever's in your administration, or whoever's your planning consultant, or your engineering consultant, when they're asked to have meetings, can then articulate it, and believe you me, if I can walk into a meeting and show them something in a document in black and white that's been approved by village council, it goes a whole lot easier, because a lot of people don't wanna hear no. So, we'll definitely talk about that planning commission next week.
Okay, there was, some, I guess, recommendations and discussions about, for the DDA, looking at other sources of funding.
Yes.
Right? So private funding, to me, I have a concern with that, because money always has strings. So whoever's given that money may want whoever's taking that money to do certain things in a certain way that favors what they want. That's why they give money. And you don't have to debate me on that.
That's an accusation.
That's
trying to clarify.
And here we go.
That's an accusation.
Those are grants, those are grants, it's all documented, grant money. We're not walking up to somebody and saying,
Can I finish, please?
I just
So,
want to make sure we're clear.
it wasn't just talking about grants, it was talking about other revenue streams. So, that is a concern. Like, what are you talking about, like, from private as well, not just grants? That was, right? It wasn't just grants you mentioned.
No, I
You
said.
mentioned private,
No doubt about it.
right, so, that's a concern, so, you don't have to debate me on it, just, you know. Real estate acquisition, there's talk about acquisition, so if there would be an acquisition by, the DDA, then, if there's a position that someone that's on the DDA could take, get an advantage if they're part of an acquisition, then what do we do about that? Let's say there's someone that's affiliated or on the board that wants to acquire the property, and they're involved with this acquisition, so there's a tension there that has to be
That's no different than one of your council members, one of the other council members saying, hey, this guy like this guy like this,
so. And
right?
So, and this is kind of an example of what Heather was talking about. When someone brings up a legitimate concern, people start badgering. And that has to be, there has to be something better done about that. You know, I should be able to freely express these concerns. They might be legitimate concerns, they might be debatable concerns, but they're concerns nonetheless that I have, and maybe others do as well. And then the final thing is, partnerships. So I think we have to be careful on how do we go about, when we have these partnerships, let's say, or whatever that partnership might be. Isn't there a process that if any board enters into a partnership that has to be board approved, the terms and conditions, what that partnership means, the give and take, what each partner gets out of it, shouldn't there be a framework and each board vote on that before anybody marches forward and say, we have a partnership with such and such organization?
I think those things go back, a lot of what you're talking about is, conflicts.
Yeah.
Conflicts of interest, and then also how you establish relationships. So, like with the partnerships, usually there's a memorandum of understanding. But a lot of these things you can take care of in bylaws, in terms of, how the DDA operates, how the planning commission operates, and how the village council operates when we get into these conflicts of interest. But then it's number one, having those rules and bylaws. Number two, abiding by them.
Right.
And then also, how do you have good dialogue? And sometimes that is just one of the things I didn't do and I should have done as a facilitator is we should have maybe had ground rules, in terms of how you talk to each other. And that then can alleviate the badgering, as you characterize it. Because when you just have simple rules of speak for yourself, everybody gets, their turn, one person at a time, and then be nice, all the things that you learned in kindergarten, that helps. But we recognize that this is hard to do that because this is your community, and this is where you live, and this is what you feel passionate about. So a lot of times when not having those rules, that's when we get to a point where we're not communicating. So I apologize for not having those, it was just because last time we were here, you're so phenomenal.
I agree completely. I think it needs to be open dialogue with people to sit down and understand what that is. I think some of the conflicts of interest that you had mentioned, I sit on another DDA, and we had purchased the city of Monroe, we purchased the optical building. We white boxed it, bid it ready for somebody else to purchase. One of the DDA members that was there owns a real estate firm that's in the city, sits on the board, but he represented a potential offer that was coming through. So when we had to vote on that offer that came through, he could not vote. So I think just having clear rules and understanding where conflicts of interest are, disclosing them, and making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable. So, and I agree with the private funds and looking at each thing and what does this mean? What are we connecting ourselves with? So I agree with that, but I think that us sitting in a room and almost having a work session on what do these relationships look like, and how do we work well with each other, because I think that we, have a good plan, but we've got to build out the structure underneath that.
Yeah, and I should have said, I welcome any comment after I'm done, I just wanted to complete my thoughts, so please, if you have comments to counter me, by all means, I welcome it. It's good to get that dialogue out.
No, I don't think anybody's here for the conflict of interest. I think, especially us, we're here to try to better the downtown. You know what I mean? I don't think that anyone is out there trying to make $1 by, the little inside scoop we got. You know what I mean? I don't think it plays like that. And then you were talking about, making rules and laws. What's the point of making them and you can't follow them?
If you make them, you have to make the commitment to follow them.
Right. We have laws in our downtown ordinances. Do we follow them all?
We want you to.
Okay, all right,
Exactly.
I saw.
No.
Yeah, I
Here in the news.
I did want to I think part of the problem here is that you've been operating off a DDA plan that goes back to 1988. And so consequently, you know, the village council has not had an opportunity to review, and you do have the authority to approve that plan. But the last time you approved it was in 1988. The last amendment was in 2016, but it was just an amendment to extend. Think of how many things have changed in the downtown. And so, moving forward, you know, the ability for the DDA to interact with, you know, the council is in two forms. One is through the plan, and with the new plan, the DDA is bound to follow that plan. And two, and actually there's three things. Two is the annual budget for the DDA, which you will approve, which you have the obligation to approve. You have the right to approve. And then the third thing is by your appointments. And your appointments, you make the appointments to DDA, the Planning Commission, and other things. And so, there's a lot more interaction that can come from this than has perhaps in the past. Primarily, we've been operating off this old plan. And I think that's the opportunity, you know, to really raise these issues legitimately through the budget process, through the appointment process, through, you know, the contractual process. There's likely to be things that may have to come before council for their approval, and all probably the council for that. And members of the DDA are subject to the same conflict of interest provisions as any other public officials are also. So, I think that's all part of this process that we've worked to try to impress upon both the DDA and also, you know, upon the rest of the members of this body, is that there's a lot more interaction at play here than perhaps has been done in the past, simply because you've been dealing with such a dated plan.
You may have answered part of my question. Harry Whiteland, the Planning Commission. One of the things I asked when I was appointed, is there a conflict of interest statement for the Planning Commission board members? There wasn't. Is there one for the DDA board members, a conflict of interest statement that you sign?
No,
Well, is there one for the village council?
nor nepotism clause.
So maybe these are things that we could work on in the strategic plan and looking at putting those together as part of that good governance objective.
I've served on numerous boards that have always signed the conflict of interest statement.
All right, we are almost at 8:30, and I know when I planned this, I had thought that we would get done within an hour and a half, but I recognize that we still have to go through a couple of things, and there's members of the public here. So I would just like to pivot and ask all the group, just go around starting at this end, and if you could share with us as we're pushing, as we're pushing to complete this process, one of two things. In the next 5 years to the village, what are you most excited about? Or what do you think will be the village's biggest challenge? And it would be lovely to hear from everyone, but feel free to pass.
I'm looking forward to all the buildings being full, and there being people walking downtown, and, you know, a bike path, and the traffic going through at 25 miles an hour instead of 50 miles an hour. The kids being able to cross the street during after school without having to worry about an idiot running the sign.
Amen.
I mean, it just,
Oh my God.
those are the things that I want to see happen, and those are the things that are in the DDA TIF plan. So that's my goal.
I totally agree with what you said.
I would like to see, more from our boards where we're looking at the feedback that we're getting from the community and actually using those as our guidelines to make changes and constantly seeking more community feedback and building more trust.
I'm looking forward to seeing an economic development director come on board, help
propel our plan forward. It feels aspirational, and without them. But I know it's something we can do, we have the ability to do with some staffing to support us.
I'd like to see the downtown businesses full. At the same time, I would like to see the partnership amongst the three that are here tonight. I'm also, what Hallie said, the growth in 5 years is something that we're gonna have to take on in a way that has to be infrastructured the right way. I mean, right now, we're at a growth and we don't even got the room for what we have. They moved 5th grade to the junior high because of the capacity of students. Our roads are not even built for how many cars we go by up and down the roads. It's like we wanna build something, but we don't know what we're building it with.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying, yeah, and that, I can see how that would be worrisome, and I think that's something we can look at in the master plan.
As a community, recognizing that there are a lot of communities who are dying, we're very fortunate to not be in that position. As we look to hire an economic development director, or partnerships within the county or the community at large, even the state, there is development that we may not find to be beneficial. We have to listen to those opportunities anyway. And it's their job, those partnerships, it's their job to bring those things to us, for us to then make those decisions ourselves, not to have those things not taken or allow those things. And one thing I see a lot in different communities is that there isn't the continual investment in infrastructure. We have the obligation that it's easy not to spend money, but in the same token, we don't spend money every single year on infrastructure, then we fall behind the 8 ball, and these problems start to happen.
I like what everyone else said, but I'm looking forward to utilizing signage to show off the river, because a lot of people come to destinations to see beautiful bodies of water, and I think people just drive past this one. And I do think if we get more signage, and I think that could be really good stopping, even if we don't get a footbridge because it's millions, but.
I'm excited about the growth, continued growth of the village, but also sustainable. Sustainable growth, looking at the infrastructure. I think a big takeaway from this, Michael, right, is looking at our 5-year plan, our future land use. And is our infrastructure current, like, does it have capacity to where we're seeing what our future land use is it sustainable?
One last thing for me is, the one thing it seems like we lack here, we have all these subdivisions, and they're all $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 homes, whatever, and that's fine and dandy, I'm not against that. I wish we would come up with, I would call it a senior subdivision, where maybe these houses are maybe 1,200, 1,500 square feet, not 3,000 square feet.
Amen.
All right, well, I'm excited about it. Everything else that everybody else has said, they're excited. The one thing I heard through the things with the vision of the DDA plan there was keeping that small town feeling. And it doesn't just stay with the downtown area. I think throughout the village there, we have that opportunity to keep that small town feeling there. And I'm seeing it with the packet that you sent out there. I'm seeing the plan for that. The biggest challenges, and we've heard it before, and Howard, he pinpointed it there, is infrastructure. Our future land use map has to be in alignment with infrastructure improvements, because that comes first. If we have somebody that shows up and wants to build something there, and the infrastructure's not there, then it's gonna be very messy. So infrastructure, and it's not only, you hit on sewer, traffic, power, water, all of that together there. And we've ran through this before where we had some developments that wanted to come in there, when our water system's not built for that. Second challenge is scheduling the priorities. You can't do everything at once. So we have to have a list of priorities and the budget to go along with those. The one thing I was excited about that I saw in here that I had not seen before was the monitoring of the plans. You got to schedule to monitor the plans. We went through all the effort before to have a master plan and a TIF plan and so forth there. And then we put them on the shelf and we waited to the next time time that they came up for discussion here. So seeing that schedule there, the challenge with that there is who's gonna do it? You already pinpointed there that you need staff in order to be able to do that there. So a development director there, I think that's gonna be another one of the challenges there that will fulfill some of the needs to make these plans successful.
Thanks.
I've heard excellent comments down through here already. My main concern is that we have a vibrant downtown. I moved to Dundee from Tecumseh, lived there for 30 years. I watched that downtown become a vibrant downtown with people walking the sidewalks, shopping and carrying bags of stuff that they bought. You know, we can do the same thing here. The reason why we aren't doing it, because we don't have an economic development director to help us facilitate that type of growth. And I don't know why we do not have this by now. It's in the budget supposedly, but nothing gets done. The second thing is, on the planning commission, we need to be focused on more low-cost housing. I live in a subdivision of $400,000 homes. I know the majority of the people out there right now who are new homeowners can't afford that type of house. So we need smaller subdivisions of smaller homes. And I think that's something we need to put into our master plan. Not apartments, not duplexes, because we have plenty of those, but more affordable housing. So that's what I'd like to see in the future. And the third thing is, we don't need things like data centers, which is a township problem, not
Yeah, that's a
our
township
city.
problem.
Yeah, it's a township problem.
Property in the village.
But battery plant, hell no, you know, there's too many damn problems with that. And, so I think we need to focus as a planning commission on, you know, master plan, keeping those out at all costs. Shirley?
I'd like to start off with stating that I was have been a business person for over 60 years. I started in the downtown area. So my heart is still in the downtown, even though my business is on the edge of town now. And I've seen it go up and I've seen it go down. And one of the big problems, I think, is a lot of people things become stale and stagnant. They don't become proactive. They just let things go and flow. So I think what we have to do in the future is make sure we stay on top of everything. We take and make sure our rules, our regulations are up to date, our ordinances are up to date. So we all have to work together to make sure that we are all on the same page and working together as a group. So many times the different organizations, our planning commission, our DDA, all the things are off into different directions. I think they need to take and have more cooperation by having more workshops together so that everyone knows what they're thinking and how to get there. And not be going in a different direction, because they all have to work together for the same goal, and that is for our community.
Thank you.
Well, the small town touch, I wanna keep that for the rest of my life, and what everybody said is spot on. And Dave, median income houses 10 years ago were like 250, now they're up over 400,000 and stuff in your area.
We just have $1 million home go
Yes.
for sale here in the village, so $1 million, who's gonna buy that? Anyway.
We could maybe look at Monroe Mason.
Okay, wait, we're closing, 1% at a time. So,
We could do like Monroe does that with Mason Run, that was in the newspaper again, where it's affordable
Right.
housing for the people, not at 200, 250, because we're getting carried away with going to the 400,000. But I do want the growth, like Howard saying, it's coming, whether we want it or not, and we'll do fine. I mean, we've improved in the last 2 years with the planning commission, with DDA and the council. And we are getting stuff done slowly. I know it's frustrating that we don't go as fast as what we can. But I agree with you too, that the data centers and stuff, anything that we can do to stop it, prolong it as much as possible we should do. I've noticed more eagles around. And when I worked in Monroe, they had the Horton trespass law there, and they had foxes, deer, and eagles. So I would get to see 60 deer every day, 12 eagles along the lake, and foxes and stuff, and everything made it. Some of the farmers around here, I know at one time were, the state was paying, or the federal government was paying for a ducks preserve or something, I know.
Yeah, Ducks Unlimited.
Ducks Unlimited and stuff. And then our Chrysler plant, they had quail and stuff, which they still do. If we could surround ourselves with nature stuff, it might slow the data center down. And the people here in Dundee are changing a little bit. The original people that's been here all their life, or 50 years of it or so, we help one another, we always have. And it's still gonna continue that way. Maybe we can teach the new people that come into town to be fun-loving. I've never seen so many young families with little kids during my walks, and it's encouraging. It's good to see Dundee grow little by little. Sure, Steve.
Thank you, President. I'm looking forward to keeping that small town feeling here. I'm glad to see that that's the overarching theme for the strategic plan. Continue to build out our infrastructure, keep it up to date, maintain it, make sure it's appropriately capacitized. Beautiful parks and a beautiful downtown. I'm looking forward to that. We have beautiful parks, and the downtown is very nice, and it can be even better, so looking forward to that. Walkable, and then we talked about just like good governance, like between the boards and the village office itself. Good governance, like good services to the community, to the business owners. So people get good service, and also the business owners, or potential business owners, know what to expect from our village office that we follow through.
I'm enjoying the dialogue. I spent 50 years in the economic development profession. Those communities that did not grow or identify growth as an objective and manage that growth, I've seen those communities fail and shrink. It's like a church that only wants the elder people in the church. We don't want any new music. We don't want youth group here. What happens, those churches grow old along with the minister, and pretty soon you see a for sale sign. It's all about creating a roadmap, and I know that's what our consulting firm is doing here, the master plan. We just cannot be afraid of growth. It's coming.
It's coming.
We have to accept it. It's what we want it to be. I moved here from Texas, from Frisco, that grew 8,000 to 10,000 people a year, 2,500% growth over a 30-year period. And the one key strength of that community of 250,000 people was the small town feel.
I'm glad Joe hit on it with the future land use map and the infrastructure, because we're the real asset management plan now. And so when that's delivered, that's gonna tell us where the water lines need to be replaced, roads, storm sewer, et cetera, and how that relates. I get excited about that stuff. It's not the funnest thing to read. The biggest challenge is not really even been addressed at all. It's not, we need a redundant water line. We need a loop water line. Before I got here last year, we had a water main break, and we were minutes away from losing water everywhere. And that's important. People like it when they see cops go down their driveway, like when their toilet flushes and their sink runs but not backs up. I think that redundant water line will really help with pressure in places and allow us to manage future growth when it does come.
Village manager here.
I don't have water. There are a lot of things to be excited about, that people have been talking about, and I think that's very important. but I wanna look at the challenge. And I think one of the main challenges is the dynamics of the population change. And it's about, and working together to get past personality conflicts and interpersonal relationship conflicts that we see, and reducing the emotional overtones that come along with a lot of the current issues that we're having, and whether that's financial issues or getting new businesses versus old businesses, things like that. And I think part of how we fix that is meetings like this, where you come in and Steve can have an opinion and not get pushed back on it immediately. But that's gonna take time. It's gonna take time for us to work together and know that I don't agree with Steve on a lot of the stuff he says, but it doesn't mean Steve's a bad guy or that he's trying to upset me, right? Or I don't agree with some of the things that George says, but we still eat candy together when we sit up there in the meetings. This already had on the table. But I mean, there are conflicts. There are people that have lived here forever that don't like this other guy from high school, and then they talk, it happens, right? But not everybody's like that here, right? I'm not from here originally, but I've lived here for 5 years, and I've seen some of these things, and I don't know the backstory on a lot of the issues that are happening. So somebody will say something, and I'll be like, so what? Like, well, and then I start hearing about the backstory, and I'm like, yeah, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So I think that's one of the things that we really need to look at. It has nothing to do with the facts and figures and numbers that are up here, but just about being people. And the small town feel comes from the people, not the numbers and the stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I see as something that we are responsible for fixing. The people in the room right now.
Nicely said.
Bravo.
Nicely said.
Okay, obviously I agree with what Rick just said, and I think there's a lot of work to be done, amongst the DDA, the village, planning, zoning, parks and rec. There's a lot of things that I might have said and still say, feelings that I have. And when I see ordinances ignored by all kinds of people, that shouldn't happen. But I am excited about the growth. I'm excited about seeing new businesses downtown. I'm excited about maybe a new stocking of walleye in the river. Anything we can do to help the community, and it's just let the community know that we have their backs. We are the officials that have their backs. And when they come to us and they yell, no data center, we should honor it. They come to us and yell, no DTE, we should honor that. Not say, oh no, you have to accept it. If that's what you're gonna say, you need to change your mind. I hope everyone here can work with each other and work to bring more business to downtown and enjoy the downtown. Thank you.
I'm actually not excited for growth, but I know it's coming. I do like the small town, that's why I moved here. And something that I think everyone kind of maybe overlooked, I think Neuron mentioned it though, is the schools cannot withhold or sustain the growth right now. Our high school could, yes, but our elementary and middle school could not. So that's something that everyone needs to consider when we're talking about bringing more housing and how we do this and how we do that. The next thing will be a millage saying we need to build an elementary, middle school, because the 14 classrooms will not be enough that we just built.
Or you'd have to give the one school to the elementary and just build another middle school.
Right.
It's
something, so it's gonna be one or the other. Just something to, plant in everyone's mind that our school systems were packed right now. Other things that I am excited about, I am excited to get some downtown going. I miss Swan Creek, I wish they'd come back. And getting those built with new businesses would be everybody, this is only my third meeting, so I'm still naive and asking questions, and I guess one of my questions was, and I was a little afraid to ask it, cause it probably is dumb, but why can't we just change ordinances? Why can't we just say, this is no longer industrial and this is agricultural, and get rid of the data center so they can't build there? I mean, people are sending me memes saying you plant rare species in there that can't be dug up anymore, and you go plant them there, and so people can't dig there no more, so stuff like that. So, I'll bring the simple stuff in for you.
I would say I'm just most excited for seeing what Dundee will look like in the future. I think Dundee has a very bright future, and I think Dundee has a lot of talented people in this room that can help bring that vision to life. So I'm just excited to be a part of that, and I'm hopeful that everything will turn out really well for our whole community, and I think it will.
Thank you, and thank you all for taking this time tonight. I know that we had to pivot from last week, but thank you for the good conversation tonight, and we hope to, I'm going to turn it over to the president, and then close up the meeting with public comment. But again, our thanks.
Public comment. Anybody from the public have a comment?
First, I'd like to say the idea of restricting conflict of interest, that would be extremely exciting to me. I'm 52 years old, I've lived here my whole life. I've seen some pretty bad people involved in the village and township over the years, where it was clearly they were running things for pure profit. So I guess it's not really a call out, I wouldn't say him saying that, because if it's all honest people here, what better time to implement those rules? You know, if we just leave this open and a group of dishonest people gets in here again, you know, it's gonna be ripe for their picking. The other issue is, I don't see any towns out here dying that aren't developing. I mean, maybe Petersburg, Ida, they're exactly the same as when I was a kid. They should have withered away and died by now, you know, from the lack of development. We had Ida's Dollar General changed from being a grocery store to Dollar General. I think Ed Reese told me last time they have a new elevator there at the grain mill. And that's about it. It's everyone wants their kid to go to school there. It's like probably the #1 school of choice in Monroe County. And as far as like designating things for future land use, Dundee will never be affordable if we create a map of areas where we would like to develop. All that's gonna do is bring in land speculators. We already see that on this side of town. We've seen what pieces of property go from $20,000 an acre to $1 million an acre. No local people are gonna develop that. We're never gonna see affordable housing in those situations. Maybe using conditional rezoning almost exclusively where the person selling the land and the person developing the land come to the planning commission and say, we would like to build a housing development here, and you would say, well, that's a little out of line for what we would like. We're looking for something a little more affordable. You know, we can control that. If we start this rezoning, we end up in the same situation we are with the data center, whereas we can't refuse. You know, we have no reason to refuse legally. Like, as I think you were saying, how do we stop this stuff? Some of that stuff was done by the state, like Public Act 110 says we can't do exclusionary zoning. 233 says they can put, you know, green energy projects anywhere that they want. Some of that stuff is the law, but as far as the data center, that was rezoned as industrial years ago and just left sit there. And land speculators have bought and sold, bought and sold, bought and sold. The west side of town is the same way. Some of this property was rezoned 25 years ago, and because it was done in such a way where there was no real plan for the land, it was just rezoned and annexed into the village, it brought out the land speculators. So if we start saying property north of Cabela's could be utilized for multi-family, or not multi-family, you know, dense housing developments, the first thing that's gonna happen is it will not be agricultural anymore. Somebody from out of town is gonna come in and purchase that property for an astronomical rate, and they may or may not even be the ones who develop it. They may sell it again and again and again, and then you have no control over what type of housing goes in.
And we see the battery facility over here, that property was sold to a developer, it was annexed into the village, it was rezoned for, you know, a subdivision, and now they wanna sell it to a battery facility. So, when we do this arbitrary rezoning, we're just opening up for speculating, and nothing will ever be affordable here. And then the other thing about the downtown is, we're 15 minutes from what? 15 minutes to the edge of Ann Arbor, 15 minutes to Toledo, 15 minutes to Monroe. It is totally different than Tecumseh. Tecumseh's 45 minutes to an hour away from anywhere. So small businesses in the downtown work fairly well there, and we'll never develop the downtown if all of our focus is on the west side of town besides that. So, I mean,
Leave it up.
there's nothing there, and then also some other towns, like I think I've talked to Tim about it, like we see Stockbridge, they put in all these biking trails, they put in a BMX pump track, they put in things to draw people into the downtown, and now people are starting to say, hey, there's a lot of people down here. We'll do a restaurant, we'll do this type of business. There's no recreational activities that draw people to the downtown. All we've been focused on for the last 35 years is making money, and you know, how can we make as much money as possible? And we've deserted the downtown for every type of fast food restaurant you can imagine on the west side of town, and you know, giant high-rise apartment buildings now, and a huge retail store. And then as far as jobs would go, I would say Toledo Jeep has had open hiring for a couple of years where you can walk in and start the next day. Every skilled trades within an hour, hour and a half around here is begging for people. There's no shortage of employment. You know, people just aren't seeking it out. So what I'm saying is I don't know if we really need this elaborate plan for the village. I would say we just control it as it comes to us. You know, but yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, I'll say something here. First off, when you talked about challenges in the future, one thing I'd wanna caution is, you know, the battery center and then the data center, and what is the risk that if we have these wonderful plans, that Michigan can't just override us? You know, are we making sure that we are really locking down, you know, what our plans are, so that it really pushes them out through that master plan? Like, what are we doing to get ahead of it and not behind it, like how Celine, you know, ended up? And when it comes to like the growth of downtown, I think there's a lot of focus like in that very small area. And I think when you look at what's kind of around there, I feel like we have a river right there. We have a riverfront area, no restaurants, no coffee shops, no, you know, it's like, I almost feel like, are we thinking outside the box and looking at communities that are successful in developing that small town feel and also growing their communities, which in turn increases our property values? I mean, we wanna have affordable housing, but we also wanna have not something that's gonna turn our property values upside down. So when you look at cities like Plymouth, Northville, you know, Saline, you know, Saline has a very small downtown feel, you know, and they built that Salt restaurant and that church, and, you know, I think that there's a lot of businesses that are allowed to come into Dundee and fail because there's not really a plan of what is allowed in the downtown area. So I think, like, if you want to develop the downtown, there has to be a plan of what kinds of businesses, like, you know, like a brewery. Like you look even at Tecumseh's got a brewery. Once that brewery was in, this was in, and that was in. They have a specialty shop for wine and cheese, and you know, all these things that really make it like a quaint downtown. And I feel like I said, we really need to look at other communities too that are successful, and look at what we have here with this riverfront, and really try to make a plan for not just the little triangle, but also what's surrounding it. Because I think that there's opportunities to maybe buy out some of these businesses and change them into something else, you know, to make it more.
Well, we can't buy out no businesses.
Well, or let's just say, well, you can't buy them out, but I'm saying make offers, or, like, I gotta think there's some point, there's going to be an opportunity to take a business, like, there's storefronts all over the place. So what are you planning to put in there? Just.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And in order to make money, you gotta spend money.
Exactly.
Them towns dump money into their towns.
Exactly.
We just milk the cow till it's dry.
Right, exactly. And I think that also the infrastructure, making sure you have the water, electricity, that kind of thing. And then also, like, re-looking at some of the streets and how they're laid out. Because I tell you, I was almost hit about a couple weeks ago. A kid came running at me with me and my dog walking, and he ended up about a foot away from me before he turned immediately, and the corner of his bumper was a foot away from me. And I was like, I almost got hit. and then, like, I don't know, I feel like we have to look at some of the problem areas in the streets, because there are ways to develop them a little bit better to make it clearer for drivers to, like, for example, by that Dairy Queen, not just get right in the right lane and just keep going forward to get onto 23. You gotta kind of almost develop that road inward a little bit to push them into turning right only, and then they can't proceed forward. So, like I said, it's just kind of thinking outside the box and looking at like what we have overall and looking at what has made other, small towns successful and kind of plan for that kind of thing when you do bring businesses in that can be successful. So,
It goes to better signage and stuff on the close to 23. And Mr. Carlisle has mentioned it to me many times when we first started this 5-year plan. This is the big thing right here, the river. I know if I owned a business, I'd have 2 porches back there and anything to draw the people here.
Right.
Because once you come here, you love Dundee.
Right, really, Dundee has become incredible to downtown, it's beautiful, this village, this council, everybody loves this town and they treat it like they care about it. They put flowers and then they put like the ribbons and things around town, and then they decorate the trees on Christmas, but like I said, there are certain things that I feel are missing, and it's thinking outside the box a little bit more. And I think the signage thing is a good idea, but at the same time, there's signs there, but people don't always look at signs. And I feel like that one where you're like right in that right lane, where it says you gotta turn right, you have the ability to go straight. In my mind, you almost gotta bring that in one more lane, curve it in, so they can't go straight, they know to turn right, and then it gives the opportunity to free up the 2 lanes and allow the 3rd lane, which would then there'd be a 4th for the turn, take that right on to lane 23, But it's just kind of almost forcing people because they don't look at signs.
Right, you realize that is MDOT and the state.
Right, yeah, we gotta work
We
with
can
them.
work with them to push what you're saying.
Right, yeah. And you just gotta work with them. I mean, there's safety issues all over the place. Like I said, I almost got hit. I like about a year ago or so, I saw a kid almost get hit by a car. And I'm thinking, nothing has changed. There's no like flashers to say there's a person ready to cross,
That's part of the
Like,
traffic
yeah.
calming plan.
Okay.
Right, so anyways, I just wanted to, I would love to be, I'm actually retiring tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm.
Anybody else?
Keep talking about wanting to make single homes and stuff, but you want like North Cabela's out there, them nice farm fields, or up next to Kroger's. Put houses in, where you gonna farm, where you gonna eat? You gonna eat your telephones? If you don't have farmers, you ain't gonna eat nothing. Gotta be clear about that.
Yeah, on the same note I said too, Tim, like, getting the downtown developed is gonna kind of rely on restricting businesses from continuing on the west side, because who's gonna shop downtown when there's unlimited retail going in on the other side? Like,
Go ahead.
My name is Jim Fahey, I'm from Lawson Place, which is here in Dundee. It's seniors and disabled. We've been there 40 years, from Gold House Dundee to Cabela's Dundee, the whole transition, different town. I have very, 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 very grave concerns about the safety, accessibility, pedestrian safety of Dundee, It's incredibly dangerous. I don't know how I'm gonna get home. It's gonna be very hazardous for me. There's sidewalks smashed up, there's all kind of pedestrian crossings that are dangerous to get out. I don't even know where to begin. It is incredibly dangerous, and again, I think to myself, where I live at, that's all seniors. Those women, it's all the car. As long as you have a car, you're good. We have an aging baby boom generation. Once you lose that car, you're done. Your life is over. You're gonna be homebound. We have one bus that comes, takes us to Monroe once a month. Your life, you might feel healthy and strong right now. As soon as you lose that car, you are done. Your life is over. And there is no accessibility. If it was hard for me, it was hard for me to get here. It would be impossible for them. There is no way that any of the residents where I live has any chance at all of getting here. It is gonna be so hard to even get back. I don't know how many get to the hill. There are pieces of sidewalk that are smashed up. Even my power chair. I've been trapped. I've had to call 911 because I was trapped in broken segments of sidewalk. The ramps are incredibly steep. There's sticks all over the road. I pick them up all the time. Where it was very easy to cut these trees, these little segments of stick that are just small enough to trip some old lady or some kid on a scooter, fall over. We had a kid hit. I don't even know where to begin. Right here at this crossing. I've had cops out there just a few weeks ago. I had Sergeant Swillow, I thought Officer Tony have said, hey, this intersection is so dangerous. He himself, with a uniform that says police, it has a stop sign, stop. Right there, across the street says he's almost been run over. Sergeant Swillow's almost been run over. It's incredibly dangerous right here. And now I appreciate the village. I love these plants. I think they're beautiful, but it's obstructed view. Officer Tony asked the village to please cut that. They did, but right now, if you're in a pickup truck, you're not gonna see right now. I might get hit right there tonight. I might not survive going home tonight. It's gonna be very hazardous. I'll shut up. If it's hard for me, it will be impossible for them. It's bad development that seems to be fueling some of this, and I don't know where to begin. If it's hard for me, it will be impossible for them, impossible. There's no way they would make this, anyway, I don't even know where to begin, I'll shut up.
You almost need a safety commission, right? Like somebody who focuses on safety.
Yeah, look, we got it. I mean, everybody's had their turn, so is any
I'm
future
sorry.
ones? I mean, you can continue for a minute, if you wish.
I really appreciate it, I'm sorry. Again, with 408 Tecumseh, I had to call 911. A few weeks ago. I was wheeling my chair, and there were lines down in the middle of the sidewalk. I called the fire department out, and the police officer Cameron comes out and says, please stay away from it. We don't know what it is. When the fire department got there, they said, we don't know. It could be cable, it could be phone, it could be electric. That little girl that was electrocuted in Monroe, we don't know. She's just trying to clean up her yard. Even the fire department said, I don't know what that is. They went inside, pulled the box, they came out and cut it. They said, we don't know what that is. We have no idea. But again, I'll shut up, I promise. It seems right there. There's an example where an out-of-town landlord has more value than the people that actually live here. Whoever that was, that place, it was just, kids were injured there, fighting laws involved. I don't know how much that's gonna cost the village. I don't know anything about law. Without fighting laws involved, kids were hurt there. They finally tore that down, thank heaven. Right next door, I'll shut up. I don't want to call her on. Andrea next door. Yeah, I told her. I asked the firefighter, I promise I'll shut up. I said, what are the chances if that building catches fire that you're gonna be able to save that one? The firefighter said, no, there's no way. It's just so close. But I'll shut up, I promise.
All right, anybody else?
I got one. Just if we're trying to keep the small town feel, why are we bringing in all the big town items like the flop cameras? I really don't feel like, I need to be watched 24/7 when I'm driving through town. That's all I got.
I got a ladder and some trash bags, we can take care of that.
Yeah, if I got laser lights still. I'm good.
All right.
Okay,
Nancy?
just quick, I was looking for the information from the last joint meeting on the website. I believe it was November, was it? January 28th maybe, that you had a joint meeting before, is that true? January, yeah. I could not find that in the website, I couldn't find meeting minutes or anything, I couldn't find any information on it. But I wanted to kind of prepare by reading that before I came here, but it's not available, which I would feel probably you guys should make that available. The other thing is that not broadcasting this, not streaming this to the community, I think you really lost out on something that could have been beneficial for you, for the community to be able to watch this. I mean, we're taping it now, you know, we're streaming it now, but you have all the equipment to stream it, you know, and you could have been doing that, and this would have been good for people to hear what you're doing, you know, what you're trying to do for the community. You know, it could have gone a long way, and I think you're missing opportunities that way. But I would agree with most of what you said. I like the small town, I've lived here all my life. The community in downtown area, we miss the mark. If you look at like Mylands celebration, they just had their festival. You know, they had a nice community festival, a lot of people attended. Fireworks here were great, fireworks there were great. They have a little, what do you call it, the festival with all the rides for the kids and things like that, a lot of things for family. They have more musical outlets than we have here. Tecumseh has musical outlets, Saline has musical outlets. We used to have music in the park, and I'm not sure if we're still doing that.
We are.
Okay, and I haven't seen a whole lot of that lately, but anyways.
It just happened 2 Fridays ago.
Ah, okay. I stand corrected, I sit corrected. But anyways, I think you missed an opportunity on just letting the public see what you're doing.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Anybody else?
Me.
Kayla.
Kayla?
I can't go without talking. And my thoughts are gonna be all over the place, so I apologize. So obviously, I like the small town feel. I am not a member of the village. I'm a member of the township. And I feel, like I've said a billion times here and at the township and everywhere, that this stuff, it probably goes along with good governance, is the stuff you're doing in the village is affecting the township people, just like the stuff that the people do in the township affects the village people. So maybe a collaboration with the two governments would be good. It goes kind of back to what Rachel was saying, and we don't talk to them and they don't talk to us, and the township doesn't get along with the village or whatever. But there's new people at the township, there's new people at the village. I think it's a great time to start moving along with that. So I agree with growing. Hard for me to say because I don't like it. But I think you're missing out on the township residents, because like Phil said, I could go 15 minutes to Monroe, I could go 15 minutes to Milan, I could go 50, we're anywhere. You're playing to your township people as you're playing to your village people. You want to draw people into the village, so saying that, oh, it's the township problem, or oh, that's not even in our zone, no, that's just over the line, that's in Milan, or that's just over the line, that's in London, not really our deal. That I think you're kind of missing a point. It doesn't really stop at the lines. Just when we talk about the data center and battery storage. Battery storage is in the village. It's literally behind Arbor Chase sub. Like, battery storage is on residential land. Arbor Chase sold it. That's the seller. Cloverleaf, the developer for the data center, they have option on all Sears property east of 23. That's 750 acres. That includes 105 acres in the village. They could put it in the village. They have water there. They don't have water where they want to go, but they have water right there in the village. So I don't think that it's, and I'm not saying anyone said this, but I don't think it's not our problem. The gas power plant, that's right outside the village lines, either on M50 in Petersburg area or in Milan, but on Day Road and Oakey Road on Ann Arbor Road. That's literally step over the line from Dundee. So I do like the hometown feel. I think we're kind of, if we go with the route of we want people to come visit, we want to play to the tourism, we want to do more housing, we want to do all that, then we need to kind of, it's conflicting when we allow or entertain the ideas of industrial business in the village especially, And I don't want it to be pushed out to the township because the village doesn't want it. I mean, I live on a dead-end dirt road with 10 acres and battery storage is 0.9 miles from a house. Like, it just seems ridiculous to me. A couple other things. I do want to mention that I think in your master plan you should include karst. I know I talk about karst all the time. So in case people don't know what I'm talking about, the U.S. Geological Survey mapped karst, the whole Monroe County as karst, which is our topography, our geology. It's a unique type of geology. It's composed of soluble carbonate rocks like limestone and dolomite. Karst rock is easily dissolved by slightly acidic groundwater and rainwater over time. This creates distinctive landforms such as caves, sinkholes, and sinking streams, and fractured rocks. So think of like Swiss cheese holes in rocks. So this is a Monroe County problem. So places that aren't mapped as karst don't have the same issues. Where they don't have karst, their groundwater moves 1 to 2 inches per year, where ours moves 7 to 10 miles per day. So we have to think about that, same with the infrastructure. Before we do these developments, before we do even housing, we have to think about what we sit on top of. And that's really important when you're talking about development, but not only industrial development, but commercial and residential as well. So I think you should probably include a little blip about the topography, geology, and maybe include that in there. To close, I'm almost done. To close, when I close my eyes and I think of Dundee, like she said, what do you think of? I think of kids playing. I think of my kids growing up on our 10 acres. I think of them farming, 4-H, Dundee schools, fishing, enjoying the river, enjoying the town, doing the activities in town. I don't think of trying to shelter them from the fallout from the battery storage facility, the noise from the data center, the poisoned river that runs through our front yard. Those are things that I think are challenging me right now, and I think are going to be a challenge in the future. Is we're going to have to try and essentially some parts fight the state and fight off things to protect our residents over and take into consideration our residents' health over growth in the industrial kind of side of things. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. I think, yes, the growth is good. Which type of growth? I don't think we should have both. I really think that if you're going to focus on that small town feel and really be about the people, you need to listen to the people, put up a fight against these things. And I know it costs money and time and determination, but put up a fight against these things and look out for your residents.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
What everybody said, Megan is doing it in shorthand. I haven't seen that in quite a while. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on the public tonight? Jan?
I would like to see them get the village stores filled. And you sell all the farm ground, what you gonna eat? You need farmers and farm ground.
Very good. Anybody else? Okay, now we're going to the closing comments of the council, the planning commission, and DDA. I would just ask, since we're at a late hour, to keep it short if anybody wants to add on any more. I think we've all spoken.
I have one thing, because the data centers and the battery storage and solar, we've seen a lot of our surrounding communities have to tackle these issues, and ourselves as well, earlier in the year. I think it's going to be very important before we finish our plan to look and almost do an M&M on what went wrong in some of these areas like Saline, what's happening in Frenchtown, and what happened over here in Dundee, and Michaela's a really great source, to really dive deep into what happened there, break them apart, and how we can better have a plan that allows us to listen to what our community wants, and then make a decision moving forward.
Okay, anybody else? Well, hearing none and seeing none, thank you everybody for being so polite, and Carla, what we're doing an This is a good meeting. And very informational. I do agree with that. And it's 9:16 and no further business. This meeting is now